child trains with other children to become the saviors of Earth by fighting in zero gravity and then playing video games. No, this isn't the story of the birthday party I always wanted. It's Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card.
And this is the Book Pile.
I'm Kellen Erskine. I'm a comic, a father, and if my 6-year-old was ever recruited by a space agency to fight an alien war, I would probably do something to try and stop it.
And I'm David Vance. As a teenager, I tried to get Orson Scott Card to sign my copy of Chamber of Secrets, and he took it very badly. So now my life goal is to trick him into doing it. If you can help me, please leave a comment on the YouTube video.
I forgot about that. That is amazing. So you stood in line for an hour or more with a Harry Potter book.
I wasn't in line very long. I got to the bookshop late, so all the Ender's Game copies were gone. And it was just books of his I'd never heard of. And Chamber of Secrets was right there. And I was like, would you sign Chamber of Secrets for me? He was not cool about it.
All right. As always, please feel free to leave us an amazing review that I will only take well.
I have a friend who told me that he listens to this podcast on his commute so he doesn't fall asleep. He said this is the only thing that keeps him awake. But he said, I haven't left a review because I don't want Kellen to tease me. I told him I would grant him safe passage. If he left a review, I would make sure he wasn't teased.
I hope that's not what's holding us back from getting thousands of reviews.
What if it is?
Every potential reviewer is like the person who's afraid to sit in the front row of a comedy club. All right, if you want to see me live, here's a quick rundown. Listen for your city or state. State, really. If you live in a state, you can drive to any city. I'm good enough. April 19th. I'll be in Louisville, Kentucky. Then April 20th to the 22nd, Fort Wayne, Indiana. Then April 23rd, I'm in Appleton, Wisconsin. Then April 26th, I'm in Tacoma, Washington. April 27th to the 29th, Spokane, Washington. I'm going to mispronounce that one every time on purpose. May 6th, I'm very excited about this. Just announced I'll be at Cap City Comedy Club. It's a club I've always wanted to perform at in Austin, Texas.
Wow.
June 15th, I'm playing in an outdoor show in the beautiful Mill Valley, California, opposite the Golden Gate Bridge from San Francisco. Then July 7th through 8th, I'm in St. Paul, Minnesota. Then July 9th, I'm in Mondovi, Wisconsin. Go to kellenerskine.com for tickets.
Did your booking agent just decide, like, oh, I should work?
So this is my first time experiencing the story in book form, and I'm really torn on this book, actually, Dave, and you're finding this out right now. I'm torn because I think it's one of the greatest science fiction stories I've ever read, from the high-profile war strategy to the intentional unclarity on who the villain is to the mind-blowing reveal at the end. The story itself is fantastic. I just wasn't a fan of some of the inner workings of this facility where Ender trains. And real quick, I want to know after my thoughts here, Dave, if maybe for you this is a Goonie situation. I've mentioned that before, where people who grew up watching it love it, but if you just watch it as an adult, it's a terrible movie. And not that this is, but where Ender trains, it's sort of this Hogwarts in space for future child soldiers, but just a few of the things in there made me uneasy, like how often Orson Scott Card decides the kids should be naked. Like, you get to the end of the book and you realize there was no reason to mention any of it. Like, it's not like J.K. Rowling was ever like, and then some of the students were slow at changing their robes. She just skipped over all those parts, right? Like, you never see Jack Bauer use the bathroom, even though you're watching 24 hours of his life. It just seems appropriate to maybe omit some things. Also, there's this weird sort of dialect that the students go in and out of, and maybe it reads better on paper, but it was uncomfortable for me to listen to on Audible, like, without sounding racist just talking about it. The narrator, at least the one that I listened to, chose to sound like a middle-aged white guy trying to sound very cool. And I still don't know what purpose any of that served. But again, I just don't know why there had to be naked kids in this. But what are your thoughts on that, Dave?
I will say that I first read this at an age where none of that occurred to me. And I think I'm so used to this book that still none of that occurred to me on this read. This was one of my all-time favorite books as a kid, and it is really nice to go back to a favorite and find out that it's actually really good, because like I haven't seen it in many years, but I'm sure Master of Disguise has to be bad.
Oh, man.
There's no way it's as good as I remember. Also, apparently in that movie, when he's in the giant turtle suit, he was wearing that costume when he held hands and prayed in a prayer circle right after 9/11.
Oh, no.
Doesn't that feel like an act of disrespect?
Yeah.
Imagine you died and an angel comes up to you like, hey, someone prayed for you. Here, let me show you the tape. No, not the human, the turtle. Is it a good movie? Well, 1% of critics think so.
Is that what it gets on Rotten Tomatoes?
Yes.
1%.
Don't you think that one reviewer was so embarrassed afterward? All right, like always, check out the YouTube video of this episode, link in bio.
As is sometimes the case, today's episode has major spoilers. And in addition to that, it'll just be clear overall if you've already read the book with its huge twist at the end, or if you've at least seen the movie, which hardcore fans of the book are going to hate me for encouraging, but I don't care. I do this for free.
Finally, our next two books are Unbroken and Story.
All right, and without further ado, here are two lessons that we took from Ender's Game. All right, lesson 1, a timeless story predicts the future, but not too far. So we've discussed how a lot of stories that endure are often the ones that consistently deal with the raw human experience and emotions, right? Like Hamlet, Don Quixote, Invasion of the Body Snatchers. But I think it's harder to have a science fiction story that endures the way that this one does.
Yeah.
Look at some of the earliest attempts at science fiction. It's like fun and silly now. Dave, you and I covered Frankenstein last year, which is now just more fascinating as a case study, but it doesn't exactly hold up. And then there's Jules Verne's From Earth to the Moon, which is a novel about three men who essentially build a giant bullet and shoot themselves into outer space, which is either the first spaceship or the earliest episode of Jackass. But what surprised me was how this 40-year-old story doesn't feel dated at all.
Yeah.
And I think part of that has to do with how weirdly accurate Orson Scott Card was in predicting future technology. What I took from the book is that he took what existed at the time, which was 1985, uncannily the same year that Marty McFly went into the future. He took that.
Incredible.
He just sort of used his imagination, I think, to extend technology out, but just far enough. Here are just a handful of things that stuck out to me. So the whole world and part of this outer space military, they're connected by a network of computers called the Nets. And this was a decade before the actual internet was available to the public.
Wow.
So not only did he project that like the entire world could be connected by it, but he goes a step further and shows like social repercussions of what could happen if you have the net. There is the possibility that maybe some people could pretend to be something that they weren't.
Yeah. He also predicted Call of Duty because that final battle scene is a bunch of soldiers listening on headsets as a bunch of 12-year-olds tell them to kill themselves.
Oh my God. Also, they essentially have iPads and they use them mostly to play these realistic video games. Again, this was written in 1985, so I think he needs more credit given for his imagination
Sure.
because the most realistic gaming situation at the time was when a green and black computer screen said that you had died of dysentery.
Random aside, do you think dysentery would be better or worse in space?
Oh, God. Such a graphic. At least I don't have the pain from the pressure of Earth's gravity, but I'd rather not be orbited by the symptoms. And not only are the games realistic in Ender's Game, but before he's doing the Space War simulations, I'm using finger quotes, but Ender doesn't know that. Simulations. Before that, he's playing what we would now term as a modern open world game, which just didn't exist in 1985, meaning a 3D game where you could just wander around and explore. Card, he also came up with unmanned war drones in this story. Actually, now that I'm saying all this, I don't know enough of the history of everything. It actually may have been like a Star Trek flip phone situation where rather than predicting the future, people in the present just decided that life should imitate art and then be monetized.
Right.
Like that's how the clamshell phones were born, just from Trekkies designing stuff. So maybe this was less of a case of prediction and more just that one day a weapons manufacturer was reading Ender's Game like, oh, it's not a bad idea. And one could argue that drones have since killed more people than flip phones, but who will ever really know?
It's like a story William McCaskill tells, and I may be getting the players wrong, but it was something like the U.S. intelligence agencies released a report about how we have to stop Al-Qaeda from investing in biological weapons. And then Al-Qaeda saw it and was like, oh, we should invest in biological weapons.
No. So with all this, it's not to say that eventually the technology in this story won't become distractingly irrelevant in the coming decades, but it's just amazing to me that it's lasted this long. And if anything, because he was such a Nostradamus about it, it's maybe a little less mind-blowing now if you're just reading it in the context of present day and more like, well, yeah, this tech is cool.
I know.
Because it exists.
I didn't think about any of that.
Oh, any of that, the fact that it was written in 1985, like reading it from that perspective.
Yeah, I took all of that for granted.
Right. But it holds up, so it's less like a wonder and more just...
Yeah, I read it and I was like, I could have come up with that.
I remember watching the first Iron Man movie and how I felt at one point when Tony Stark calls his boss on his phone, which has a screen where they can see each other. Mm-hmm. And that was amazing. That was just 2008. The first iPhone had barely been released and it had none of those features. So at the time, all of us were like, Tony Stark invented video camera phone calls? The future of the Marvel universe is crazy. And then fast forward to now, if my phone rings and I see that someone's trying to FaceTime me, I'm like, ugh. Can we just text or something?
All right, lesson 2. In a moral dilemma, whatever you choose, people will judge you. So, Kellen, on multiple occasions off the podcast, you have asked me how I became so kind and pure and good. And the answer is it's because I took an ethics course in college. Because the trick to being a good person is just reading Kant. Anyway, in that course, I got good at asking ethics questions, which just means questions where all the options are bad. Like, would you kill one person to save 5? Or would you steal bread to feed baby Hitler, etc.? Oh, by the way, it's weird. Ethics is about living a good life, but every ethics professor is immediately like, which person would you kill? So anyway, Kellen, I'm going to ask you a moral dilemma from this book. An alien race attacks your planet twice, but they haven't been back in a while. You have a chance to totally annihilate their whole species, but you're not sure they're going to attack again. If you spare them and you're wrong, they will come and kill everyone you love. In this thought experiment, you have the capacity for love. If you kill them and you're wrong, you are the biggest mass murderer in history. What do you do?
I think my solution would be to just go crazy and have as much fun as I could with my life and hope to die before all that stuff happened.
Smart. Your grandkids would love that. Yeah, Grandpa had the chance to save all of us. No, yeah, he just got really into collecting Hot Wheels. He did a lot of pranks. It's nice to know as we're being vivisected that he enjoyed his last years. That's honestly my beef with a lot of ethics classes, is that we act like ethics is the front line in being a good person, and it's just not. Front line is just developing good habits of just being a good person, right? All the easy stuff. And then second line is when you face a crazy trade-off like that, second line is trying to be creative to see if there's not a crazy moral trade-off, right? And then third line is if all that other stuff fails, then you need to make tough choices. You know what I mean? But we go into ethics classes like, this is what it means to be moral.
Right. Like, couldn't a third option be that we just rock this trolley off of the tracks?
Right. Like, you could come up with 30 ways to make that trolley not hit those people, but instead, all of our focus is on taking those excuses away. And it's good to think about, but not as, like, your first go-to.
Right. It's like, the question is always, do you head left or right, instead of, or do you also look for a brake lever?
Yeah. So in the book, spoiler alert, they kill all the buggers and then find out it was all a misunderstanding, and now Ender has to live with that guilt forever. And then in the future, millions of people judge him for it. But also, if he showed mercy and most of humanity got wiped out, anyone still alive would also have judged him. So just know, if you choose something and people judge you, that doesn't mean that if you chose the other thing, they would not have judged you.
I loved the reveal at the end. It's so surprising and so tragic. And it's also odd to me that they chose to let those kids know right away. Like, that was pretty messed up. If you aren't gonna hide it from him, at least, give him a few days to be like, oh, also, by the way, they were all real. Now we're going to head home. I think I would have just tried to conceal the fact forever from those kids that it was all real. I would have been like, well, that was fun, huh, everyone? You sure beat my game. My game that for no reason y'all had to travel all the way out here to space to play. Now, well, let's go back. We'll have some macaroni and cheese. Like, tears are just inexplicably streaming from my face.
Earth is inexplicably celebrating for no reason.
Yeah, they're just so jazzed. You guys had fun out here.
See, I would do the opposite. I'm going to convince my kids at the end of playing Sims that it was all real. Everything you did to those poor people. All right, random facts.
Ender Wiggin is the greatest example of someone with the coolest first name and the lamest last one. Like, imagine if your name were Armando McPoop.
I have an uncle named Armando, and I'm going to pitch that last name to him.
To me, the opposite of this phenomenon is Harry Styles.
I read an article about this book that cracked me up. It's called Orson Scott Card's Unconscionable Defense of Genocide. Subtitle, Ender's Game essentially argues that mass killing can be not just good, but almost holy.
What?
You know, back in school when you wrote a book report of a book that you did not finish? Ender at the end is like, what a horrible mistake we made. And the whole next 3 books are about his shame. It's like reading a book about the trolley dilemma and then writing an unconscionable defense of killing people with trains. I told you about this. My cousin who read And Then There Were None, but then missed that last chapter that reveals who the murderer is.
Yeah, I can't imagine like those conversations. So, how was the book? Oh man, the mystery was amazing. Who did it? I still don't know. It's still out there.
I would love at some point to make a nonfiction book where you just interview kids or interview adults and just make a list of the crazy beliefs that kids have that no one ever corrects because you don't know they have them. Like my niece was bringing home a dinosaur egg from her class, and then she very quietly was like, I am worried the dinosaur will eat us.
Oh no.
Like, how are parents supposed to mitigate against those crazy beliefs they don't know the kids have?
Yeah. I had this big stuffed dog at the end of my bed every night as a child because I thought he would protect me. And one night I woke up, and in that half dream state, I just saw the silhouette and I thought that a lion was on my bed. So I ran into my parents' room, got them. There's a lion on my bed. They come back into my room, and obviously my dog is just sitting there. And I was like, okay, good. Rocket scared it away.
I was 14, so...
And I told them that my dog must have fought off the lion. And they were like, sure. But then I just went to bed. That doesn't make me feel better that this lion could come back. Like they could have said there was no lion.
They play into your fantasy too much. Wow, look at these scratch marks the lion left. Look at the cut screen on your window. Yeah. I've told you this before, that I think kids are scared of monsters because kids used to get eaten by hyenas, right? It seems like such a reasonable fear to have evolutionarily.
I came up with an upstream solution for my kids' problem of being scared of monsters under their beds by never buying them bed stands. It's a true story. My kid's bed's just the box spring sits on the floor. Makes for a lower bed. It's easier to get into. And then I tell them, don't worry, any monsters that are under there would have to be the really, really skinny kind. Good night.
They're skinny because they're hungry. I have talked to you about this, about how, like, if the top side of the bed is where kids are supposed to relax, why is the bottom side a hiding place? How does it help kids grow up to make them sleep on the mouth of a cave?
So Orson Scott Card started a doctoral program at Notre Dame, but he dropped out because he started making lots of money with his books. And I enjoy stories like that. I've got a friend in the tech industry who basically said that companies will do this, hire you with a bonus. Their attitude is like, what can we pay you to stop furthering your education so you can start doing real work now? But I also don't think it always applies. Like, I doubt hospitals are poaching off med students like, hey, do you want to keep studying? Ugh. Or do you want to start making money with surgery today?
Yeah. When are you going to commit to something?
So there's a lot of fighting strategy in this book, which is fascinating to me. And I don't even know if it's actually good. I'm not a strategist, but it at least sounds smart to me. But one of the craziest moves, though it doesn't even happen in a battle, it's when Ender is in their public shower. Again, not sure why it had to be the shower, but whatever, Orson. And 7 kids come in to beat him up. And Ender reacts by saying to the leader of the group, oh, Bonzo. By the way, he's not calling him a name. The kid's name is Bonzo.
That's his name.
He says, your father would be so proud of you. You can go home and tell him I had only 6 of my friends to help me, even though he was naked and wet and alone. Which I think is such a such a ballsy move. My takeaway from this is, if you're going to get jumped, just use heavy sarcasm and tell the biggest guy that it's awesome he needs so much help. And then really hope he doesn't call your bluff, because those kids could have destroyed Ender.
Right.
And by the way, I think if you kill Ender, you get to rename yourself Endist.
It is funny how those
Joke
tricks...
of the day.
Kellen, I have a question for you. Did you like The Cosby Show growing up?
Oh, man. I have what I feel like is a good answer, because no one wants to say yes anymore.
Oh, no, I loved it growing up.
Oh, so you're an apologist. I loved The Cosby Show, but I never thought that Bill Cosby's stand-up was ever funny. And I stand by that I'm not someone who decided that once he was found guilty. I feel like I was way ahead of the game in thinking that his stories about his fat friend were never that hilarious. But yeah, I enjoyed The Cosby Show sitcom for sure.
We loved The Cosby Show as kids, and I haven't gone back to it because I'm worried either I won't enjoy it and part of my childhood is gone, or I will enjoy it, and what does that say about me? Like, what if you just loved Hitler's art? Anyway, I bring this up because a lot of my friends are gay and, you know, they're in happy marriages or happy relationships. And Orson has written a lot of public things that are very unkind to LGBT people, like beyond having a political stance, very mean language. And I don't have an easy answer to how to handle loving this book and disagreeing so much with the author. Mm-hmm. Like, you know, the importance of being earnest would have been less funny if I had known some things.
For sure, you know, you're using an iPhone right now, which has, you know, dubious manufacturing process that maybe we don't ethically agree with, but boy, is it convenient, you know? I think there's a little gray area, but not a lot, from someone saying some hateful, hurtful, dumb stuff, and then someone actually causing harm, you know, like Cosby or Hitler, as you brought up. I think there's maybe a sliding scale, because I don't know. I also love Chick-fil-A.
I will say I agree with his endorsement of genocide. It was more the... I am learning that any ethical question just means whatever you choose, you'll feel bad.
Yes.
When I took that ethics course in college, at the time I was this young kid who had the opinion, oh, you can find the right answer to any of these things with enough reason. And now I'm like, oh, they're just deliberately set up to torture you.
Yeah.
And also the biggest grift in an ethics course is that the professor never has to answer any questions.
Yeah.
They get to just be above it all. And they can be so smug, like they have some answer you don't know.
They get to be high and mighty and just observe everyone's faces slowly falling throughout the class. After Ender loses a fight to an old man, his unsolicited mentor, Mazer Rackham, this guy says, You'll have to be better with your fleet than you are with your body, or no one will be safe with you in command." And I just don't think that has much to do with it. Like, I know a few fat guys who are great at video games.
Right.
Like, they're addicted to Mountain Dew, and their fleets are crushing it. So,
You know how Napoleon had a great left hook? I guess he would mostly have to use uppercuts, wouldn't he? I'm just realizing that I know the names from all of the punches because I read the Hardy Boys as a kid. Those boys get knocked out so much. They for sure have serious damage. Is that why they always think they're 16 and 17?
I love what the book has to say about creativity in this moment, when Ender is trying to convince this other character, Bean, to come up with some more high-profile strategy. He says, I need you to be clever, Bean. I need you to think of solutions to problems we haven't seen yet. I want you to try things no one has ever tried because they're absolutely stupid. And I love it because he's asking him to be purely creative. That's what the brainstorming process is. It's what I do with jokes every day. You push it and push it. You're not careful. You get completely ridiculous because sometimes For me, that brilliant thought or solution or punchline is just around the corner after something really dumb. And I don't know why that's the process, but it's just how it works. Like, you push too far so that you can pull back a little, and you can still end up where no one else has ever been.
Right.
You think that Armando poops grow on trees, Dave? I came up with way more other stupid names to land on that gem. No, that's not the best example. But if you want to find real world examples, it's fun to look up the designs of airplane prototypes before the Wright brothers, and you can see this process in action. Just really insane designs, like a guy on a bicycle flapping plywood wings. But now we can cross the Atlantic in 3 hours.
Right.
But it had to start somewhere. Well, we could until the Concorde crashed, but you get what I'm saying.
So this random fact is a follow-up from last week. We were talking Oscar Wilde and about how it was illegal to be gay in England at the time. Then a reader sent a comment about all the predatory things Wilde probably did. So I just want to clarify, that's not what we were going to bat for.
Yeah.
Just want to be very clear.
For sure, neither of us had any idea of even the things that were just implied that he may have done. Obviously, we weren't joking about any of that.
Right. We also do not advocate making a portrait of yourself that carries all of your sins.
Doesn't that sound like something that you could buy at Borgen and Burke's?
It sounds like a wonderful indulgence. We were doing a walking tour in Italy, and the guide brought us up to a place where indulgences were sold, and it showed that if you paid this much, you got out of purgatory for 1,000 years. But then he was like, don't buy here. The place around the corner has better prices.
Dave, when you reread this book for the podcast, did you notice how many times the word fart is used?
I did not.
Orson Scott Card, he has a story about a kid that gets bullied for the first half of the book, but the way that he's bullied, it's like you can tell that Orson Scott Card was never bullied, and he never bullied anyone. So he has like no frame of reference other than that it's massively insulting to call someone a fart eater. Like, that's the worst thing you can say to a child. That's an insult where if you called me that, I would start laughing halfway through your insult.
That does seem weird that a future sci-fi author never got bullied. Okay, one thing you can try today. Recognize that in a moral dilemma, you will never be fully happy with your choice. So deal with it. All right, this book could also be called An Unconscionable Defense of Genocide.
This book could also be called And You Thought Spoiling Santa Was Traumatizing.
This book could also be called Sign My Book, Orson. This book inside an Ender's Game jacket. You will not need your reading glasses. All right, to recap our favorite lessons from Ender's Game. 1, a timeless story predicts the future well. 2, in a moral dilemma, whatever you choose, people will judge you.
And 3, if you come across an entire alien civilization that can't talk, don't even try sign language, just blow them up. Don't try to write anything down or come up with a written code. Just obliterate all 1 trillion of them.
This genocide could have been an email.